It's not often where I get more excited about a shoe the more and more miles I put into them, but that's exactly what happened with this shoe. Let's talk about the New Balance Rebel version 5 after 100 miles. Yo, what's going on? My name is Kafuzi and I'm an athlete runner who reviews running shoes here on YouTube. And today I'm talking to you guys about the New Balance Rebel version 5 after 100 miles. But before I give my thoughts on this shoe, I do want to go over some disclosures. This is a pair of shoes that New Balance sent to me for the purpose of review, so I didn't have to pay for these shoes. However, nobody's paying me to make this video or to include their brand in this video, and no one's going to get a chance to preview any of my footage or my thoughts before you guys get a chance to see this video on YouTube. So with that disclosure out of the way, let's talk about the Rebel version 5 after 100 miles. And for these follow-up long-term reviews, let's talk about how I've been using the shoe. Now, kind of the ideal use case for this shoe is when I feel like I'm a little beat up, maybe I'm deep into a marathon training block and I want a recovery shoe, but I still kind of have a lot of miles that I need to run that day and I don't want it to take forever. That's exactly where the Rebel version 5 has been like the ideal shoe for me to use. That's when I've been most excited to put it on. But more generally, it's been a fantastic daily trainer for me that has an incredible amount of pace versatility. It's a shoe that I can use for just my regular everyday runs, not just a recovery run. But it's a shoe that I could use for like a midweek long run or even a longer run on the weekends. And it's even a shoe that I could use for some pace work as well. Now, it's not something that I bring for my biggest, toughest workouts of the marathon training block and maybe not for like those key indicator workouts. But if it's something where I've got a fartlek or even some intervals that I wanted to do on the roads, the Rebel version 5 is a light enough, peppy enough shoe that's also exciting to be able to run in. Plus, it can do all those other things that you might want to do in an everyday trainer, whether it's an easy run, a long run, or a very chill and slow run. Now that we've talked about how I've been using the shoe, let's talk about how this shoe's been holding up. Now, I think there's a couple of kind of cosmetic-ish things that are going on here. We are seeing some creasing happening with the foam, and normally I don't worry too much about that when it comes to a Puma-based midsole foam, but I do think some of the creasing here is indicative that the shoe has been getting a little bit of love, but overall it's not something that I'm too concerned with. I'm mainly seeing it in the orange painted foam, which shows, I think, the contrast of the creases a little bit more, but overall, I don't think it's a huge problem at this 100 mile mark. And as far as the upper goes, the wear and tear that I'm most noticing about it is that the shoe has a little bit of an odor to it. It's holding on to some of that sweat smell from the summer. I put most of my miles in this shoe in the summer months when it was a lot hotter. And so those are the kind of two overall things that I'm noticing. More specifically, when talking about the midsole foam, I feel like it still feels really nice underfoot. It's holding up exceptionally well, even though sometimes with Puma, we are kind of in the mindset that Puma is really fragile somehow and doesn't last very long. The way that they formulated the midsole foam in this shoe at 100 miles, it still feels really great. It doesn't feel like it's fresh out of the box, but it also doesn't feel like it's going to die on me anytime soon. The foam is still delivering on that fun, peppy, but also cushioned experience that I fell in love with at the first few miles in this shoe and that I'm still really enjoying now at 100 miles. Now, taking a closer look at the upper, I'm not seeing a single stitch or a single overlay starting to become frayed or starting to peel off by any means. So everything is holding up really well. The one thing I am noticing is that it's kind of getting a little bit of a crease in the forefoot, and we saw this in the Rebel version 4 as well. I think the materials that they chose for the Rebel 4 and version 5 are, if not the same, very similar. And it's kind of like this little crescent of a crease that's over the toe box. And I think it's because two things. One, because there is so much volume and space in this upper, I think that for me, because I'm not completely filling that space, there's some creasing that's happening. And two, because a lot of shoes, when there is a rocker up front, the rocker will become more pronounced over time. So I think that this shoe probably started a little bit more like this, and there wasn't so much of a crease in the forefoot. And then as the shoe started to kind of curl on its own over miles, that's where this curl starts to develop a little bit more. But a minor cosmetic thing that really doesn't affect the performance of the shoe at all, but just something visually that I've been able to notice. And there's really only one place that's taking any sort of wear, and that's on the right outer heel. I'm starting to see some wear on this pad of the two skids of rubber in the heel. On the outer side, on that lateral side, I'm starting to see some wear where some of the etchings into the rubber are fading away, and it just is becoming almost slick in just that one little corner of a piece. But for the rest of the shoe, and especially this high traffic area and high wear area for me typically, I'm not seeing a similar amount of wear. So the very thin amount of rubber that they are using on this shoe is holding up really well, and it doesn't look to me like a 100-mile shoe. On the left shoe, I'm not seeing that same wear pattern. It just happens to be on this right outer heel, but on the left side, everything looks really nice. I'm not seeing very many signs of wear at all, and I'm very impressed with how it's performing. I am seeing a little bit of scuffing that's happening on the exposed midsole foam that is on the bottom of the shoe, and that makes sense for a channel like this because what's happening is the foam is compressing down when your foot is landing on it, and so that's pushing the foam into the ground a little bit right here. At this point, this level of scuffing is pretty much just cosmetic, so it's not something I'm worried about at all, but it is something that I noted. So overall, this shoe is holding up really well. It runs great, it looks great, doesn't smell so great, but it's not the worst smelling shoe that I've seen at 100 miles. So I'm really happy with how this shoe is holding up. Now let's wrap up this video by updating my buying guide, and we'll also give some new alternative recommendations. The Rebel version 5 is a fun and fast daily trainer with an incredible amount of pace versatility, and over the miles it's been able to maintain that fun and fast experience. It's currently available for $145, which I think is just a little bit expensive, and I think we mainly have tariffs to thank for that increased price. But if you are looking to save a couple of bucks, I think you can get the New York City Marathon edition of the Rebel version 5 for $128, and that is an absolutely lovely price for a shoe that is one of my favorite shoes of 2025. But let's take a look at some of the alternatives that are out there on the market to see where that 145 and 128 stack up. Now, when I first reviewed the Rebel version 5, I gave you the alternatives of the Nova Blast 5 and the Hyperion 3. I'm not quite sure in retrospect if the Hyperion 3 is a great alternative in terms of what the experience is in those shoes, but I do think that the Nova Blast 5 is definitely worth still considering. Let me give you two more shoes to think about. The next shoe that I want to talk about is another one of my favorite shoes for 2025, and this is from Adidas. This is the Evo SL. This is another shoe that is using a elevated foam rather than kind of the EVAs and supercritical EVAs that we've seen in other shoes in the past. This is using Light Strike Pro, or at least an older version of Light Strike Pro from Adidas. It's got a little bit of a plastic shank in there to keep things from getting too flexible, but it's a straightforward and really fun daily trainer that, like the Rebel version 5, has a lot of pace versatility, and it has a lot of fun to it. I say the Evo SL is a slightly more dense experience. If you've run in any of the Adios Pro series, you kind of understand what that means. And the Rebel version 5 has a more airy, more squishy type of sensation to it. So that's the main difference in terms of the experience underfoot, but I would use both of these shoes very similarly. I do prefer the styling of the Evo SL to the extent that that matters more than I like the look of the Rebel version 5, although I think both of these shoes are absolutely gorgeous. The Evo SL comes at $150, which is more expensive than the Rebel version 5, but you can find some colors of the Evo SL on sale for $120, and that's even cheaper than the New York City Marathon edition of the Rebel version 5. But I'd say they're both about the same price, and I feel like those discounted prices are very easy pickups if you like some of the more modern, a little bit bouncier, a little bit squishier of the daily training options. Now, the last shoe that I want to talk about today, it's another shoe that I've been enjoying more and more the more miles I put into it, and that's from Puma. This is the Velocity Nitro 4. Now, this is a shoe that is using aliphatic TPU, which is kind of my favorite buzzword in running shoes these days. And we've seen it in daily trainers, but we've also seen it used in racing shoes as well. And kind of like racing ATPU and daily training ATPU are quite different things. And I think the Velocity Nitro 4 is a good example of that. Because while this shoe is really fun, it is really cushioned, and it also is really bouncy and fast, I do find that it's a little bit more firm of an experience than you're getting with the Rebel version 5. In fact, if I were to put these all in a spectrum in terms of which one is the kind of most firm and sure-footed and which one is the most squishy, airiest ones, I would say that the Rebel version 5 is the airiest of the bunch, the Evo SL is in the middle, and the Velocity Nitro 4 is on the other end of that spectrum. But it's another shoe that has a really good amount of pace versatility, really fun to wear, and I've been enjoying it more and more as I've been putting more miles into the shoe. Now, the Velocity Nitro 4 doesn't quite have as much range as the Evo SL or the Rebel version 5. But I would say for people that don't want quite as tall or as squishy of an experience, but still want something that feels really modern and fun, I'd say the Velocity Nitro 4 is the way to go. This shoe comes in at $140 retail, and I feel like that's a good price for what you're getting in that shoe. But I'm not seeing it discounted yet anywhere, so that puts it at a disadvantage when compared to the 120 of the Evo SL or the 128 of the Rebel version 5. But depending on the kind of experience you're looking for, any one of these three shoes could be a really excellent pickup. So those are my thoughts on the Rebel version 5 after 100 miles. Let me know if you have any other questions about this shoe or any of the shoes that I talked about in the comments down below. Or better yet, stop by the live stream that I do Mondays and Thursdays over on the Kofuzi Run Club channel. I'd love to see you guys over there in the chat. That's all for today, everybody. Thanks so much for making it all the way to the end of this video. Hopefully you guys are staying safe out there on your runs, and I will see you in the next one.
Yo, what's going on?